Sarajevo, Bosnia, 1894. Winter had tightened its grip on the war-torn city. 800 meters from his position through the swirling snow, a man adjusted the scope on his rifle. He had been motionless for 6 hours, his body slowly becoming one with the rubble of the abandoned apartment building. Only his eyes moved, tracking his target through the crosshairs of his scope. The wind whipped between shattered buildings, creating unpredictable currents that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. But William Carter had spent a lifetime preparing for moments like this. His breath formed small clouds in the freezing air as he followed a precise rhythm. Inhale, hold half, squeeze, follow through. Through his scope, he watched a figure in the distance, a Serbian sniper who had claimed 17 civilian lives in the past week alone. Women gathering water, children crossing streets, aid workers distributing food. Each life ended with mechanical precision by the man Carter now watched through his scope. Carter's finger curled around the trigger as he calculated wind speed, barometric pressure, bullet drop, and the subtle curvature of the earth. His mind processed variables that most shooters never considered. He exhaled halfway and held. The crosshairs settled on the distant figure. Carter's heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed to this single moment of perfect focus. His finger applied pressure to the trigger, a slow squeeze that required precisely 4 pounds of pressure. The rifle barked. The bullet traveled through gusting winds, maintaining its trajectory across the distance. 800 meters away, the Serbian sniper fell. One life taken to save countless others. One bullet that would never appear in official reports or military commendations. Carter disassembled his rifle with practiced efficiency. No emotion crossed his weathered face as he packed away the tools of his trade. The mission was complete, another ghost story for a war filled with shadows. Boston, 2023, almost 30 years later. A fluorescent light flickered overhead at the Liberty Range, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Jessica Miller adjusted her stance, raising her pistol toward the paper target 25 yards away. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air as she focused on her breathing. At 24, her slender frame and intelligent eyes gave little indication of the determination that had brought her to this place 3 times weekly for the past 2 years. The data analyst by day found clarity at the shooting range that was missing from her life of spreadsheets and algorithms. Each shot required the same level of precision and focus that had attracted her to mathematics. Each squeeze of the trigger was a momentary escape from the emptiness that had followed her father's passing. Her shots formed a respectable group on the target, though not as tight as she wanted. Jessica lowered her weapon, studying the pattern critically. "You're fighting your breath instead of working with it." The voice came from the lane beside hers. Jessica turned to see an older man with silver hair and steady hands examining her target. Something in his posture suggested military training, though he wore civilian clothes. Nothing about him was remarkable except his eyes. They held the calm intensity of someone who had seen too much and learned to live with it. "Your grouping is decent," he continued, "but you are still treating each shot as an isolated event rather than part of a continuous process." Jessica studied him carefully. The range had its share of older veterans who freely offered advice, some welcome, some not. But something about this man's quiet confidence caught her attention. "I'm Jessica," she said, extending her hand. "Bill Carter," he replied, his grip firm but brief. His accent was pure Boston, but something in his pronunciation suggested time spent elsewhere. As he demonstrated a breathing technique Jessica had never encountered, she noticed small details. The way he handled his weapon with unconscious precision, how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, the weathered hands that moved with deliberate economy. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked after trying his technique, surprised by the immediate improvement in her accuracy. Carter packed his range bag, his movements methodical and precise. "Different places, different times," he said, shouldering his case. "Same time next week." Jessica found herself nodding, though she wasn't sure why. There was something about Bill Carter that made her need to learn more. Not just about shooting, but about the quiet intensity that surrounded him like armor. At the front desk, Thomas Reynolds, the elderly range manager, watched Carter leave. His expression shifted when Jessica approached. "I see you met Bill," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "He gave me some shooting tips," Jessica replied. "Seems knowledgeable." Thomas glanced toward the door where Carter had exited. That man knows more about precision shooting than anyone I've ever met, he said quietly. And I spent 20 years in the service. Before Jessica could ask more, Frank Harrison, the range's official instructor, interrupted. In his mid-40s, with a policeman's build and a former cop's swagger, Frank had appointed himself Jessica's unofficial mentor since she'd started coming to the range. I saw the old man talking to you, Frank said, leaning against the counter. I'd be careful about taking advice from strangers. Some of these guys think watching war movies makes them experts. His grouping was tighter than anything I've seen you shoot, Thomas remarked mildly, causing Frank to straighten up. Who is he anyway? Frank asked. Never seen him around before. Just a member, Thomas replied, suddenly busy with paperwork. Been coming here about a month. As Jessica drove home, her mind kept returning to Carter's instructions. The simple adjustments he'd suggested had immediately improved her accuracy. What else could he teach her? The following Tuesday, Jessica arrived at the range to find Carter already there, methodically setting up his equipment. Unlike other shooters with their tactical gear and customized weapons, Carter's setup was simple, even austere. His rifle showed signs of heavy use but was immaculately maintained. You came back, he observed without looking up. You said same time next week, Jessica replied. Carter nodded once, continuing his preparations. Jessica set up in the adjacent lane, conscious of his presence. As she prepared to shoot, she attempted to implement the breathing technique he had shown her. Your stance is wrong, Carter said quietly. Jessica paused, waiting for more instruction, but Carter had already returned to his own shooting. His first 5 shots formed a group so tight it looked like a single hole. Are you going to elaborate? She finally asked. Carter set his rifle down and moved behind her. May I? He asked, gesturing toward her positioning. When Jessica nodded, he made small adjustments to her stance, explaining each modification with precision. Your body needs to absorb recoil naturally. Fighting against it creates inconsistency. His hands were impersonal but confident as he shifted her elbow slightly. As he reached across to adjust her grip, Jessica noticed a distinctive scar on his forearm, partially concealed by his sleeve. It looked like a bullet wound that had healed decades ago. Were you military? She asked. Carter's hands paused momentarily. Many people have military service, he said, neither confirming nor denying. Not like yours, Jessica pressed gently. The way you move, the way you watch everything, that's not regular military training. Carter stepped back, his expression unreadable. Try it now, he said, ignoring her question. Jessica fired a series of shots, surprised by the improvement. The adjustments felt unnatural at first, but the results were undeniable. Better, Carter acknowledged. Now do it again. 50 times. Then we'll talk about trigger control. For the next hour, Carter guided Jessica through fundamentals of marksmanship that went far beyond what Frank had taught her. He explained concepts in terms of physics and biomechanics, breaking down each element of shooting into its component parts. As they packed up their equipment, Jessica tried again. Where did you serve? Carter closed his case deliberately. The military teaches you how to shoot. It doesn't teach you how to see. See what? Jessica asked. Everything that affects your shot. Wind patterns, light variations, terrain features, your own heartbeat. Carter shouldered his bag. Most importantly, it doesn't teach you when not to shoot. Something in his tone suggested personal experience. Will you show me more next week? Jessica asked. Carter studied her for a moment. Why do you come here, Jessica? What are you looking for? The question caught her off guard. Other range regulars had asked about her unusual hobby, but none had questioned her motives so directly. My father taught me basic shooting before he died, she said finally. Coming here makes me feel connected to him somehow. It was more than she'd intended to share, but something about Carter's directness demanded honesty. Carter nodded as though her answer confirmed something. Next week, he agreed. Bring a notebook. There's math involved. As he walked away, Frank approached from the observation area. Making friends with the old-timer, he asked, his tone suggesting disapproval. He's helping me improve my technique, Jessica replied. I could help with your technique, Frank offered. I'm a certified instructor. That guy's just some random retiree. I appreciate that, Frank, but I'm curious what he has to teach. Frank's expression hardened slightly. Suit yourself, just saying we don't know anything about him. Later that evening, Jessica searched online for information about military snipers in Bosnia. The search yielded articles about the siege of Sarajevo, where Serbian forces had surrounded the city for nearly 4 years. Snipers had targeted civilians crossing streets, waiting in bread lines, or simply living their lives. The articles mentioned American involvement, but provided few details about specific operations or personnel. One photo showed civilians running across an intersection dubbed Sniper Alley, where marksmen positioned in high-rise buildings had clear fields of fire. Jessica stared at the image, trying to imagine the terror of daily life under such conditions. Had Carter been there? Had he been one of the countermeasures deployed against such tactics? Her search for William Carter Military yielded thousands of unrelated results. If he had been involved in special operations, his name wouldn't appear in public records anyway. Jessica closed her laptop, more intrigued than before. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Every Tuesday evening, Carter would arrive at the range precisely at 7, and for 2 hours he would guide Jessica through increasingly advanced marksmanship principles. His teaching style was unusual. He never directly demonstrated or provided easy answers. Instead, he would present concepts, ask questions, and occasionally correct her technique with minimal intervention. Precision isn't about the shot, he explained during one session. It's about everything that happens before the shot. 90% of marksmanship happens before you touch the trigger. He taught Jessica to read subtle wind indicators, to calculate bullet drop across various distances, to understand how temperature and humidity affected ballistics. These weren't typical lessons for recreational shooting, but Jessica absorbed them, eagerly recognizing their basis in the mathematics she used daily. Frank continued to watch their sessions with poorly concealed skepticism. "He's teaching you military sniper techniques," he commented after witnessing Carter explain range estimation using mil-dot reticles. "Not exactly useful for target shooting." "I find it interesting," Jessica replied. "What do you even know about this guy?" Frank persisted. "Have you checked his background? For all you know, he could be some washed-up wannabe." Jessica had wondered the same, but Carter's knowledge was too precise, too practiced, to be theoretical. "He knows what he's talking about," she said firmly. "I'm just saying, be careful," Frank warned. "Some of these old guys like to impress pretty young women with war stories." Jessica bristled at the implication. "He hasn't told me a single war story. In fact, he barely talks about himself at all." Which was true. Despite weeks of training together, Carter remained an enigma. He deflected personal questions with practiced ease, turning conversations back to marksmanship principles or philosophical aspects of shooting that Jessica hadn't considered. "A bullet knows only physics," he told her once. "Your job is to understand physics better than everyone else." 6 months into their unusual mentorship, Jessica began noticing details about Carter that didn't fit the profile of a typical shooting enthusiast. His equipment was pristine but showed signs of professional use rather than hobbyist care. His rifle case bore small scratches and wear marks suggesting extensive travel to environments harsher than Boston shooting ranges. During their sessions, Carter would sometimes pause mid-sentence, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to sounds no one else could hear. His awareness of his surroundings was absolute. He knew when someone entered the range before doors finished opening, could identify approaching footsteps without turning around, and positioned himself where he always had clear sight lines to exits. "You were special operations, weren't you?" Jessica asked one evening after watching him automatically check corners upon arrival. Carter's hands continued their methodical cleaning of his rifle barrel. "Some training stays with you longer than others," he said finally, neither confirming nor denying. That evening, Carter introduced Jessica to advanced techniques that seemed far beyond recreational shooting. He taught her to calculate for the Coriolis effect caused by Earth's rotation, a consideration only relevant at extreme distances. When Jessica questioned the practical application, Carter simply said, "Precision is precision. Half measures teach bad habits." The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging session when Jessica was struggling with consistency at 75 yards. Frustration affected her breathing, causing her groups to scatter widely. "Tell me about the hardest shot you ever made," she said, hoping his story might contain a lesson for overcoming difficulty. Carter set down his rifle and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she had never heard before. "Sarajevo, 1994. Winter. Target was 800 meters away, moving between buildings. Wind gusting unpredictably through the ruins. He paused, his eyes focused somewhere far beyond the range walls. Shot had to be perfect. Many lives depended on it. Jessica felt her breath catch. 800 meters was nearly half a mile, an almost impossible shot under ideal conditions, let alone in urban warfare. One bullet, Carter continued quietly. Everything I had learned, everything I had trained for came down to reading the wind between destroyed buildings, calculating the drop through cold air, and trusting that when I squeezed the trigger, the shot would go exactly where it needed to go. Did you make it? Jessica asked, though Carter's presence suggested he had. The bullet found its mark, he said simply, but the important thing wasn't the distance or in conditions. It was that everything I had practiced, every small detail I had mastered, came together in that moment. Training becomes instinct, and instinct doesn't fail when everything depends on it. For the remainder of the evening, Carter guided Jessica through mental exercises about pressure and focus, about trusting preparation when conditions weren't perfect. Her shooting improved not just in accuracy, but in consistency under stress. Walking to their cars afterward, Jessica realized Carter had shared more about his past than in all their previous sessions combined. The revelation that he had been a sniper in one of history's most brutal conflicts recontextualized everything she had learned from him. Every technique, every small adjustment, every emphasis on precision had been forged in circumstances where failure meant death. "Why are you teaching me?" she asked as they reached the parking lot. Carter paused beside his truck, an older model that was immaculately maintained despite its age. "Because knowledge dies with the person who holds it," he said, "and because you listen not just to what is said, but to what is meant." That night, Jessica researched the siege of Sarajevo, learning about the snipers who had terrorized the city and the counter-snipers who had fought to protect civilians. She began to understand that Carter's quiet precision and constant awareness weren't quirks of personality, but survival mechanisms developed during years of the most demanding combat imaginable. She also realized that her Tuesday evening lessons had been something far more significant than improving her marksmanship hobby. Carter had been passing along skills and knowledge representing decades of experience in the most serious application of their shared craft. After Carter's revelation about Sarajevo, their training sessions took on new intensity. Jessica approached each lesson with deeper respect, understanding she was receiving instruction from someone who had operated at the highest levels of military precision. Carter seemed to sense her shift in perspective and began sharing more advanced concepts that pushed her capabilities far beyond recreational shooting. He introduced terminology she had never encountered: mil-dot calculations for range estimation, Kentucky windage for quick adjustments, the difference between point-blank range and maximum effective range. Understanding ballistics isn't about memorizing charts, Carter explained, sketching trajectory curves on paper. It's about seeing the path your bullet will take before you fire. The bullet knows physics. Your job is to know physics better. Jessica's notebook filled with observations and measurements that would have seemed obsessive to other shooters. Carter taught her to record atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and barometric trends. At first, the data seemed overwhelming, but gradually she began to see patterns in how these factors affected her shots. "Why such detail for range shooting?" she asked one evening after spending 20 minutes documenting environmental conditions. "Because when conditions change rapidly, you need to adjust rapidly," Carter replied. "In war, weather doesn't wait for convenient timing. You learn to shoot in rain, snow, heat, cold, high altitude, sea level. Each condition teaches you something about how your rifle behaves." Carter's stories began to emerge more freely, though always as lessons rather than reminiscences. He spoke of shots taken in dense fog where targets were barely visible, of calculating bullet drop in extreme cold where ammunition performed differently, of making precision shots while under fire himself. Each story contained technical details that Jessica dutifully recorded, understanding these weren't war stories but master classes in advanced marksmanship. One evening, Carter brought a different rifle to the range, an older model with distinctive modifications. The scope was unlike anything Jessica had seen, and the stock showed careful customization. "This is what I carried," Carter said, setting the rifle carefully on the rest. "Not the same rifle, but the same type, same modifications. I thought you should understand what real precision equipment looks like." The rifle was heavier than Jessica's sporting model, built for accuracy over convenience. Carter demonstrated its capabilities at ranges that tested the limits of their indoor facility, placing shots with mechanical precision that made her best efforts look amateurish. "May I try it?" Jessica asked, drawn to the weapon despite feeling intimidated by its obvious pedigree. Carter nodded and guided her through the unfamiliar controls. The rifle felt different in her hands, more substantial, as if it carried the weight of its intended purpose. When she fired her first shot, the recoil and sound were more pronounced, but the precision was immediately apparent. "Feel the difference?" Carter asked as Jessica examined her target through the scope. Her shot had landed exactly where she had aimed, with an accuracy exceeding anything she had achieved with her own equipment. "It's like the rifle knows where to go," Jessica said, genuinely amazed. "Tools matter," Carter explained, "but they only amplify what the shooter brings to them. A perfect rifle in unprepared hands is worthless. Prepared hands with an imperfect rifle can still accomplish the mission." As weeks passed, Jessica noticed Carter was teaching her more than marksmanship. His lessons included fieldcraft skills that seemed beyond civilian shooting requirements. He taught her to move quietly to observe without being noticed, to think tactically about positioning and escape routes. When she questioned the relevance of such skills, Carter's response was characteristically indirect. "A complete marksman understands the environment completely," he said. "Shooting is only one part of the equation. Getting to the shooting position, safely remaining undetected, and leaving successfully are equally important skills." Jessica began to understand Carter wasn't just teaching her to shoot accurately. He was transmitting a complete philosophy of precision, patience, and tactical thinking, representing decades of development under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Every lesson built upon previous knowledge, creating a foundation of skills exceeding anything available through conventional instruction. Nearly a year into their mentorship, Jessica had transformed from an enthusiastic amateur into a marksman whose capabilities drew attention from other shooters at the range. Her consistency and precision at long distances sparked conversations about competitive shooting, though Jessica found herself more interested in the technical mastery Carter continued to share than in formal competition. During this period, Carter began revealing more about his background, though always in carefully measured portions. He had served with an elite unit that operated across multiple theaters during the conflicts of the 1990s. His role had been counter-sniper operations, protecting civilian populations and allied forces from enemy marksmen who used their skills to terrorize and control. "The worst snipers," Carter explained during one session, "are those who target innocent people. They use fear as a weapon, making entire populations afraid to move freely. Our job was to eliminate that threat." Jessica learned that Carter's unit had been deployed to Bosnia, Kosovo, and other regional conflicts, where precision marksmen on both sides had turned urban areas into deadly chess games. Enemy snipers established positions controlling key intersections, markets, or routes to water sources, effectively laying siege to civilian populations through the threat of sudden death. "How did you find them?" Jessica asked, fascinated by the tactical complexity of such operations. "Patience and pattern recognition," Carter replied. "Most snipers develop habits. They prefer certain types of positions, specific times of day, particular angles of attack. Study their behavior long enough and you can predict where they will be." Carter taught Jessica to think like both predator and prey, understanding how a skilled sniper would select positions and how an equally skilled opponent would anticipate and counter those choices. These lessons went beyond marksmanship, involving psychology, terrain analysis, and strategic thinking that Jessica found intellectually challenging. "Show me how you would approach this," Carter said one evening, spreading a detailed topographical map across their shooting bench. The map showed an urban area with buildings, streets, and elevation markers, creating a three-dimensional puzzle. Jessica studied the map, applying concepts Carter had taught her about sightlines, concealment, and escape routes. She identified several positions, providing good fields of fire while offering protection and multiple exit options. "Good choices," Carter said, marking her selections. "Now, if you were hunting the sniper in those positions, where would you look?" This became their new form of training. Carter would present tactical scenarios, and Jessica would work through the logic of both offensive and defensive positioning. Her understanding deepened as she learned to think several moves ahead, anticipating how a skilled opponent would react to various tactical decisions. One evening, Carter brought photographs to their session. The images showed urban destruction that Jessica recognized from news coverage of the Balkan conflicts. But Carter's perspective revealed details news cameras had missed. This building, Carter pointed to a partially destroyed structure, was where an enemy sniper operated for 3 weeks. He controlled this intersection, preventing civilians from reaching the marketplace. 15 people died trying to cross this street. Jessica studied the photograph, seeing how the building's damage created perfect concealment while maintaining clear sight lines to the intersection below. "How did you stop him?" she asked. Carter pointed to another building barely visible in the photograph's background. Counter-position 400 meters away, required a shot through a gap between concrete barriers, accounting for wind that swirled unpredictably between the ruins. Took 2 days of observation to understand his pattern and find the right moment. 2 days of waiting, 2 days of watching, learning habits, calculating the shot. When the moment came, there would be no second chance. He was skilled enough that missing would mean immediate relocation, and finding him again might take weeks. Carter's description painted warfare unlike anything Jessica had imagined. This wasn't the dramatic action of movies, but a methodical, almost scientific approach to life and death confrontations. Every decision required careful analysis, and success depended on superior preparation rather than luck or aggression. As these lessons continued, Jessica began to understand the psychological weight Carter carried. Each story represented not just a tactical victory, but a life or death decision that had saved civilian lives while ending another human being's existence. The precision Carter taught her had been developed under circumstances where failure meant innocent people would continue to die. "Do you ever regret it?" Jessica asked one evening after a particularly detailed discussion of counter-sniper tactics. Carter was quiet for a long time, his hands methodically cleaning his rifle with ritual precision she had come to recognize as his way of processing difficult thoughts. "Regret the necessity, not the action," he said finally. "Every shot I took saved lives that the enemy sniper would have taken." In war, sometimes the moral choice is the one that prevents greater suffering. Jessica realized that Carter's careful, methodical approach to everything wasn't just professional habit, but a way of honoring the weight of his experience. The precision he demanded, the attention to detail he insisted upon, the patience he demonstrated, were all expressions of respect for the serious responsibilities that accompanied such skills. One Tuesday evening, 18 months into their training relationship, Jessica arrived at the range to find Thomas engaged in a heated discussion with Frank. They fell silent when she approached, but the tension remained palpable. "Something wrong?" Jessica asked, setting down her range bag. "Just a disagreement about range policies," Thomas said, though his expression suggested more. Frank leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Thomas here thinks our membership standards are too loose. I think some people are getting paranoid in their old age." Thomas fixed Frank with a steady gaze. "Some members deserve more scrutiny than others." "By members you mean Carter," Jessica stated, rather than asked. "I don't trust the guy," Frank said bluntly. "Been asking around about him. Nobody in the local shooting community knows anything about him." "He's a private person," Jessica replied. "What's the problem with that?" "The problem," Frank continued, "is that I checked with friends still on the force. There's no record of a William Carter with his description ever serving in any Boston Police Department or Massachusetts state agencies. For someone who claims to have such extensive experience, he's remarkably absent from databases." "He never claimed to serve locally," Jessica pointed out. "Thomas says he recognized him from Bosnia. But Thomas was Air Force transport, not special operations. So how would he know someone supposedly working black ops? The story doesn't add up." Jessica looked at Thomas, who seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I didn't say I knew him personally," Thomas clarified. "I said he reminded me of someone I glimpsed once during a transport mission. Someone the regular troops called Ghost." Frank snorted. "Ghost, right, very dramatic. Or maybe he's just some old guy making up stories to impress a pretty young woman." Jessica felt her temper rising. "He's never tried to impress me. In fact, he barely talks about himself at all. And he certainly hasn't asked for anything in return for his instruction." "Not yet," Frank muttered. "That's enough," Thomas interrupted. "Frank, you've made your concerns clear. But Bill is a paying member who hasn't broken any rules." The conversation ended abruptly as the door opened and Carter entered carrying his usual equipment bag. His eyes scanned the group, immediately sensing the tension. Problem? He asked, his voice neutral but alert. No problem, Thomas assured him. Frank and I were just discussing some administrative matters. Carter's gaze settled on Frank for a moment before nodding once. Jessica, ready to work. As they set up their lanes, Jessica felt the weight of Frank's suspicion following them. She wondered if she should mention the conversation to Carter, but decided against it. Instead, she focused on the evening's lesson, which involved calculating wind corrections for crosswinds at varying distances. Midway through their session, Frank appeared at the observation window, watching them with undisguised skepticism. Carter noticed immediately but gave no indication beyond a slight shift in position that placed his body between Jessica and Frank's line of sight. The protective gesture wasn't lost on Jessica. It was subtle but deliberate, the movement of someone accustomed to shielding others from potential threats. When their session ended, Carter packed his equipment with his usual precision, but seemed more alert than usual. Frank doesn't trust you, Jessica said as they walked to the parking lot. He's been asking questions about your background. Carter showed no reaction beyond a slight tightening around his eyes. People often fear what they don't understand, he replied. It's a natural instinct. He thinks you're lying about your military service. Carter unlocked his truck. What do you think, Jessica? She considered the question carefully. I think you know things that can't be learned from books or movies. I think you move like someone who's spent time in dangerous places. And I think you're teaching me skills that go far beyond recreational shooting. She paused. But I also think you're holding back significant parts of your story. Carter nodded, acknowledging the assessment. There are reasons some stories remain untold, he said quietly. Some operations never officially happened. Some units never officially existed. Is Bill Carter even your real name? Jessica asked suddenly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It's the name I use now, he said, which wasn't exactly an answer. As Carter prepared to leave, Jessica asked the question that had been growing in her mind. Why me? Why are you teaching me all this? Carter studied her for a long moment. Because you remind me of someone, he said finally. Someone who understood that precision isn't just a skill, it's a responsibility. Before Jessica could ask more, Carter's phone rang. He answered it, listened briefly, then ended the call with a curt, understood. I need to go, he said suddenly businesslike. We'll continue next week. As he drove away, Jessica was left with more questions than answers. Who was William Carter really? What operations had he been involved in that remained classified decades later? And who was the person she reminded him of? Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Frank, who had followed them to the parking lot. I hope you're being careful, he said, watching Carter's truck disappear from view. That man is hiding something. We're all hiding something, Jessica replied. Some secrets are just more interesting than others. Frank shook his head. Just watch yourself. Men like that bring trouble with them. It's in their nature. Jessica couldn't argue with that assessment. Carter did seem like a man who had seen more than his share of trouble. But as she drove home, she realized she trusted him despite the mystery. His teaching had been genuine, his knowledge real, his motives seemingly honorable. She was still pondering these thoughts when her phone rang. The hospital's name on the caller ID sent a chill through her before she even answered. Ms. Miller, a professional voice asked. This is Mountain View Emergency Services calling about your brother Mark Miller. Jessica's grip tightened on the steering wheel. What's happened? Your brother was on a wildlife photography expedition in the Rocky Mountains when his group was caught in an unexpected blizzard. They've been reported missing for the past 12 hours. The world seemed to narrow around Jessica as the hospital administrator continued explaining the situation. Search and rescue teams were mobilizing, but were hampered by deteriorating weather conditions. Mark's last known position was in a remote area that would be difficult to access even in good weather. As Jessica ended the call, her mind was already racing through options. She needed to get to Colorado immediately. She needed to join the search efforts. She needed someone who understood how to operate in harsh conditions, someone who knew how to track and locate people in difficult terrain. She needed William Carter. Pulling over to the side of the road, Jessica called the range. Thomas answered on the third ring. I need to contact Bill Carter, she said without preamble. It's an emergency. There was a pause on the line. I don't have his personal information, Jessica. Members' contact details are confidential. Please, Jessica pressed. My brother is missing in the mountains. Carter has the skills to help find him. Another pause. I can't give you his information, Thomas repeated. Then more quietly, but I might be able to get a message to him. Tell him Jessica needs his help. My brother's lost in the Rockies during a blizzard. I'm flying to Colorado tonight. She provided the name of the search coordination center. Please, Thomas, it's life or death. I'll see what I can do, Thomas promised. But Jessica, be prepared. Men like Carter, they don't always want to be found. As Jessica resumed driving, her mind returned to everything Carter had taught her over the past 18 months. Not just marksmanship, but survival skills, observation techniques, tactical thinking. Had he been preparing her for something like this all along? Or was it just coincidence that his training might now help save her brother's life? Either way, she would soon discover whether the bond they had formed through countless hours of training was strong enough for Carter to emerge from whatever shadows he lived in to help her when it truly mattered. The flight to Colorado stretched Jessica's nerves to their breaking point. Every minute felt like an hour as the plane crawled across the country carrying her toward uncertainty. Her brother Mark had now been missing for 16 hours in temperatures well below freezing. Search and rescue statistics echoed in her mind. After 24 hours in such conditions, survival rates plummeted. As the plane began its descent, Jessica stared out at the vast expanse of the Rocky Mountains. Somewhere in that wilderness, Mark was fighting for his life. She closed her eyes, forcing her breathing to follow the pattern Carter had taught her. Inhale, hold half, exhale slowly, control what you can control. Robert Collins. The search and rescue coordinator met her at the airport. A weathered man in his 50s with the compact build of a career mountaineer, he conveyed quiet competence as he briefed her on the drive to base camp. Your brother's team was documenting mountain goat migration patterns when the storm hit, Collins explained. They had satellite communications, but the equipment failed yesterday morning. Last known position puts them here. He gestured to a map on his tablet indicating a remote valley high in the mountains. What are their chances? Jessica asked directly. Collins didn't sugarcoat it. Mark is an experienced outdoorsman. If the team found shelter, they could survive several days, but this storm is the worst we've seen in years. Search conditions are nearly impossible. Nearly impossible isn't the same as impossible, Jessica said firmly. Collins nodded, respecting her resolve. We have teams on standby, but visibility is near zero. Even our helicopter pilots can't fly in these conditions. Jessica studied the map, applying the terrain analysis techniques Carter had taught her. What about accessing from this ridgeline? She asked, pointing to an elevated position overlooking the valley. Collins looked surprised. That's a technical climb under good conditions. Nobody's going up there in this weather. I might know someone who could, Jessica said quietly. Collins gave her a skeptical look but continued driving toward base camp. Jessica checked her phone for the 20th time. Still no word from Carter. Had Thomas been unable to reach him? Or had Carter simply chosen not to respond? Base camp consisted of several large tents housing communications equipment, medical supplies, and a command center. Maps covered the walls marked with search grids and terrain features. Rescue personnel moved with the focused efficiency of professionals accustomed to life or death situations. Jessica was providing details about Mark's equipment and training when a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A figure stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders and silver hair. Despite the civilian clothing, William Carter carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. His eyes found Jessica immediately. I heard you need some specialized assistance, he said simply. Relief washed over her. You came. You asked, Carter replied as if that explained everything. Collins approached cautiously. Mr. Carter, I presume Jessica mentioned you might be able to help, but I should warn you this is a professional operation. We appreciate civilian support, but... Show me your maps, Carter interrupted, already moving toward the command table. His tone wasn't rude, but carried the natural authority of someone accustomed to taking charge in crises. As Collins began explaining the search parameters, Carter studied the topographical displays with practiced precision. His fingers traced routes across the terrain, eyes narrowing at key features. Jessica recognized the same analytical focus she'd seen during their training sessions. Your conventional approach routes are compromised by avalanche risk, Carter stated, pointing to several slopes. The valley is essentially a bowl that will channel the storm. Visibility at ground level will be non-existent. Collins frowned. That's why we're waiting for conditions to improve. By then it will be too late, Carter said matter-of-factly. He indicated a ridgeline above the valley. This position provides visual coverage of 80% of the search area. Two observers with proper equipment could monitor for any signs of your missing team. That position is inaccessible, Collins objected. It's over 11,000 feet with technical climbing sections. Carter regarded him steadily. Not inaccessible, just difficult. Even if someone could reach that position, what good would observation do? Visibility is less than 50 yards in the valley. Heat signatures, Carter explained. Proper equipment can detect them even through weather. Your team would have built some form of shelter. That creates a thermal difference. Collins looked skeptical. What equipment are you talking about? Carter opened his bag and removed a compact scope. Military-grade thermal imaging. Effective range of over a mile in optimal conditions. That's not standard civilian equipment, Collins noted, eyeing Carter with newfound suspicion. No, Carter agreed without elaboration. It's not. Jessica watched the exchange with growing impatience. Every minute we debate this, Mark and his team get colder. If Carter says he can reach that position, he can. Collins rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Even if I approve this plan, which I'm not saying I am, we'd need at least 4 experienced climbers to attempt that ascent safely. 2, Carter corrected. Jessica and myself. Absolutely not, Collins said firmly. Jessica's a civilian with no alpine experience. She has the necessary skills, Carter insisted. Jessica stepped forward. I've been training with Carter for 18 months. I can do this. Collins looked between them, clearly conflicted. What exactly is your background? Mr. Carter, Jessica mentioned military experience, but this operation requires specific expertise. Carter met his gaze evenly. I spent 20 years in specialized reconnaissance operations, including extreme environment insertion. I've conducted similar missions in the Hindu Kush and at higher elevations than this. If anyone can reach that position, safely I can. The quiet confidence in his voice seemed to reach Collins. And you're willing to stake Jessica's life on that assessment. I wouldn't bring her if I didn't believe she could handle it, Carter replied. But ultimately, it's her decision. All eyes turned to Jessica. She felt the weight of their gazes but didn't hesitate. My brother is out there. I'm going. Collins sighed heavily. Against my better judgment, I'll allow you to attempt this. But I need constant radio contact and you follow my orders regarding weather conditions. If I say abort you, abort immediately. Understood, Carter agreed. We'll need technical climbing gear, cold weather equipment, and emergency medical supplies. As the team assembled their equipment, Collins pulled Jessica aside. Who is this guy really? His equipment and knowledge aren't standard civilian issue. Jessica hesitated, unsure how much to share about Carter's mysterious background. He's someone who knows how to find people who don't want to be found, she said finally. Or in this case, people who very much want to be found. Collins didn't look entirely satisfied, but nodded. Keep your radio on at all times. The mountain doesn't care about experience or confidence. It kills the unprepared regardless. 2 hours later, Jessica stood at the base of the ridge, looking up at the imposing climb ahead. Snow continued to fall steadily, reducing visibility and making the ascent even more treacherous. Dressed in technical climbing gear and cold weather clothing, she felt both prepared and woefully inadequate for the task ahead. Carter checked her equipment one final time, his movements efficient and thorough. Remember what I taught you about maintaining your core temperature, he said. Once you start getting cold, it's already too late. Prevention, not reaction. Jessica nodded, adjusting her pack. I'm ready. Carter secured his rifle case across his back. The specialized thermal scope was their best hope for locating Mark's team in the whiteout conditions. Stay within 5 meters of me at all times, he instructed. Follow my exact path. The snow can mask crevasses and unstable terrain. Just like you taught me about moving through contested territory, Jessica said. A ghost of a smile crossed Carter's face. Similar principles, different consequences. He activated his radio. Base, this is Overwatch 1. Beginning ascent now. Copy that, Overwatch, Collins replied. Weather report shows intensification in approximately 4 hours. That's your window. Understood. Carter began climbing with methodical precision, testing each handhold before committing his weight. Jessica followed closely, mimicking his movements. The initial slope was manageable, but she knew the real challenge would come higher up, where the ridge narrowed and steepened. For the first hour, they climbed in silence, conserving energy and focusing on the physical demands. The falling snow made visibility increasingly difficult, but Carter navigated with uncanny confidence, as though he had memorized the terrain from the maps. During a brief rest on a small ledge, Jessica finally asked the question that had been pressing on her mind. "How did you get here so quickly? I only called Thomas last night." Carter took a sip from his water bottle, preventing it from freezing by keeping it inside his jacket. "I was already on my way when Thomas reached out." "How?" "I have certain arrangements in place. People who contact me when specific parameters are triggered." "Parameters like what?" Carter adjusted his gloves. "Your name appearing in emergency response communications, missing persons reports involving wilderness areas, a few other markers." Jessica stared at him, processing this revelation. "You've been monitoring me." "Not monitoring, just maintaining awareness." "Why?" Jessica pressed. "Why would you set up a system to track emergencies involving me?" Carter was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable in the falling snow. "Let's keep moving," he said finally. "We're losing daylight." The climb grew steeper, requiring full concentration. In some sections, Carter set anchors and safety lines, guiding Jessica through technical passages that would have been challenging even in good weather. Despite the rigorous physical demands, Jessica found herself drawing on Carter's training, controlled breathing, efficient movement, maintaining focus despite discomfort. 3 hours into the climb, they reached a particularly exposed section. The ridge narrowed to a knife edge with precipitous drops on both sides. The wind had intensified, blowing snow horizontally across their path and threatening their balance. "Stay roped to me," Carter instructed, securing a line between them. "One step at a time. Don't look down. Focus only on your next movement." Jessica nodded, steeling herself. As they inched across the narrow ridge, a sudden gust of wind caught her, momentarily throwing off her balance. Her foot slipped, sending small stones clattering down the mountainside. Before panic could set in, Carter's voice cut through the howling wind. "Breathe, Jessica. Find your center. You control your body, not the mountain." The words echoed their training sessions. Jessica regulated her breathing, readjusted her footing, and continued forward. When they reached safer ground, Carter checked her condition with professional detachment. "Your performance is satisfactory," he said, which Jessica recognized as high praise from him. Another hour to the observation position. As they resumed climbing, Jessica noticed Carter moving with increasing stiffness. During their next brief rest, she caught him massaging his left knee. "Old injury?" she asked. Carter nodded curtly. "Bosnia. Building collapsed during an extraction. Nothing serious." "You never mentioned it during our training." "It wasn't relevant to your instruction." Carter scanned the terrain ahead. "We're almost there. The final approach is the most challenging. Stay especially close." The last section required full climbing technique, with Carter setting anchors and Jessica following his lead. By the time they reached the observation position, a relatively flat area protected by an overhanging rock face, both were breathing heavily from exertion. Carter immediately began unpacking his equipment while Jessica established radio contact with base camp. "Overwatch 1 to base. We've reached the observation position." "Copy that, Overwatch," Collins replied, poorly concealed surprise in his voice. "Honestly, I didn't expect you'd make it." "Status report." "Both intact. Beginning observation operations now." Carter had assembled his rifle and attached the thermal scope. Despite their mission being observation only, Jessica understood why he'd brought the full system. The rifle provided a stable platform for the sophisticated optics, allowing for steady, extended surveillance. "Start systematic grid search," Carter instructed, showing Jessica how to use a second set of optics he'd brought. "Scan each sector thoroughly before moving to the next. Look for any heat signature that doesn't match the natural environment." They worked in silence, methodically searching the valley below. The snowfall had intensified, creating a white curtain that would have made conventional observation impossible. But through the thermal equipment, the landscape appeared as varying shades of blue and black, with warmer objects showing as yellow and red. After 40 minutes of searching, Jessica noticed something unusual in her sector. "Carter, I've got something. Grid reference H7 near the eastern slope. It's faint, but there's definitely a heat source." Carter shifted his position, training his scope on the area Jessica indicated. He studied it carefully, making minute adjustments to the optics. "Good catch," he said finally. "That's artificial. Too consistent for natural formation, too structured for wildlife. Could be a shelter. Jessica felt her heart rate accelerate. Mark? Possibly. We need to confirm. Carter contacted base camp providing the coordinates and description. Can you maintain observation while we dispatch a ground team? Collins asked. Affirmative, but the storm is intensifying. Your window for extraction is closing rapidly. Understood. Ground team is mobilizing now. Estimated arrival at target location in 3 hours. Carter checked the weather conditions, frowning. The storm front is advancing faster than predicted. Your team may not reach the location before conditions become untenable. There was a pause on the radio. What are you suggesting, Overwatch? Carter considered for a moment. We need to guide them along an alternate approach. The standard route will put them directly in the path of the advancing front. You can see the weather patterns from your position. I can read the cloud formations and wind patterns. The storm is channeling through the Northwest Pass, not the valley approach as expected. Your team needs to come in from the southeast ridge. Dead. Collins sounded skeptical. That route adds at least an hour to their approach. The standard route will add at least a day when your team gets stranded in the whiteout, Carter replied bluntly. Your call, but I'm telling you what I'm seeing from here. After a long pause, Collins responded. All right, Overwatch. We'll redirect the ground team as you suggest. Maintain observation and update if conditions change. As they continued monitoring the heat signature, Jessica noticed Carter studying her with an intensity that went beyond professional assessment. What is it? She asked. Carter seemed to consider his words carefully. You're performing exceptionally well under pressure. Not everyone can function effectively in these conditions, especially on their first alpine operation. I had a good teacher, Jessica replied. Carter nodded almost to himself. Yes, you did. There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't referring to himself. Before Jessica could question him further, Carter abruptly tensed his attention, returning to his scope. Movement at the target location. Someone has emerged from the shelter. Jessica quickly trained her optics on the area. Through the thermal imaging, she could clearly see a human figure moving slowly around what now appeared to be a makeshift snow cave. That's got to be one of them, she said, excitement building. They're alive. One confirmed survivor, Carter relayed to base camp. Appears mobile but moving with difficulty, possibly hypothermic or injured. Copy that, Overwatch. Ground team is still 2 hours out on the revised route. Carter's expression darkened as he studied the weather patterns. They're not going to make it before this front hits. The survivor is attempting to gather materials likely to reinforce their shelter. They know what's coming. Jessica watched the lone figure struggling through the deep snow, her heart aching with the knowledge it could be her brother. There has to be something we can do. Carter was silent for a long moment, weighing options with the calculated precision she had come to recognize. Finally, he made a decision. Base, this is Overwatch 1. I'm going to provide direct guidance to your ground team while proceeding to an intermediate position. Current conditions require more immediate intervention. Negative, Overwatch? Collins responded immediately. Maintain your position. Conditions between you and the target are deteriorating rapidly. Which is precisely why your team needs direct guidance, Carter replied firmly. They won't reach the target without it. Jessica realized what Carter was proposing. You're going down there. That's insanely dangerous. Carter met her gaze steadily. Sometimes the only way to save a life is to risk your own. He turned back to the radio. Base, Jessica will maintain observation position and communications. I'll establish an intermediate relay point to guide your team through the approach. After several moments of argument, Collins reluctantly agreed. Carter began repacking his essential equipment, leaving the observation gear with Jessica. Maintain regular radio contact, he instructed. Continue systematic observation of the target. If you spot any changes, especially additional survivors emerging, report immediately. I should go with you, Jessica protested. Carter shook his head. Your brother needs you alive. That means you stay here where it's relatively protected. He placed a hand on her shoulder. This is what I trained you for, Jessica. Trust your preparation. Before she could argue further, Carter secured his gear and prepared to descend toward the valley. Why are you doing this? Jessica asked. Why risk your life for someone you've never met? Carter paused, snow gathering on his shoulders as he considered her question. Because 25 years ago, someone did the same for me. Without further explanation, he began his descent, soon disappearing into the swirling snow. For the next hour, Jessica maintained her observation position, alternating between monitoring the heat signature in the valley and tracking Carter's progress through intermittent radio contact. The storm continued to intensify, reducing visibility to near zero, except through the thermal equipment. Overwatch 2 to Overwatch 1, she called it using the call signs they had established. Target status unchanged, one figure occasionally emerging from shelter, then returning inside. Copy that, Carter's voice replied, partially obscured by static. I've established intermediate position. Visual on the southeast approach. Ground team is still 90 minutes out, but making good progress. Jessica adjusted her position, trying to find a more protected angle against the increasingly fierce wind. As she shifted, her scope briefly passed over a different section of the valley. A flash of heat caught her attention. Wait, she called into the radio. I've got another signature approximately 200 meters west of the primary target, very faint, possibly buried under snow. Can you confirm it's human? Carter asked, his voice instantly alert. Jessica adjusted her optics, focusing intently on the anomaly. Thermal pattern is consistent with a partially covered human form. No movement detected. Relay coordinates to base, Carter instructed, then maintain observation on both targets. Jessica provided the new coordinates to Collins, who confirmed they would divert part of the rescue team to investigate. Overwatch 1, I'm proceeding toward the new target, Carter informed her. It's on my direct path to the ground team. Be careful, Jessica urged. Thermal signature is weak. Could be. I know what it could be, Carter interrupted gently. Keep watching the primary shelter. There may be more survivors we haven't spotted yet. Jessica continued her surveillance, fighting against the growing anxiety as the minutes ticked by. The storm had now reached full intensity, battering her position with wind and snow. Even in her protected location, the cold was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. 30 minutes passed with no communication from Carter. Jessica was about to call him when his voice finally came through, strained but controlled. Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, I've reached the secondary target. Status, Jessica asked immediately. There was a pause before Carter responded. Male, early 30s, matches your brother's description from the photo you showed me. Alive but severely hypothermic. He was separated from the main group during the initial storm. Jessica felt her heart constrict. Mark, is he conscious? Semi-conscious. I've administered emergency treatment and am preparing him for evacuation. Carter's voice remained professional, but Jessica could hear the underlying urgency. Ground team needs to prioritize this position. Subject won't survive another hour in these conditions without medical intervention. Jessica relayed the information to base camp, who confirmed they would redirect their primary resources toward Carter's position. What about the shelter? Jessica asked. The other survivor. Maintain observation, Carter instructed. I've established contact with the ground team. They're 20 minutes from my position. Once Mark is stabilized, we'll proceed to the primary shelter. The next half hour was the longest of Jessica's life. Through her scope, she watched the distant figure at the snow shelter continue to move around periodically, seemingly unaware that help was approaching. Meanwhile, Carter's location showed two heat signatures huddled together, one significantly weaker than the other. Finally, Carter's voice came through again. Ground team has reached our position. Medical personnel are treating your brother now. Prognosis is cautiously positive. Relief washed over Jessica, followed immediately by renewed concern for the other survivor. What about the person at the shelter? I'm proceeding there with part of the ground team now, Carter replied. Maintain your observation and guide us if the subject moves. Jessica watched through her scope as several heat signatures began moving toward the snow shelter. They were still approximately 15 minutes away when she noticed something alarming. Overwatch 1, the subject is leaving the shelter, moving west away from your approach. Can you guide us? Carter asked immediately. Subject is approximately 200 meters west of the shelter, now moving slowly but steadily. They appear to be following some kind of trail or path. Carter relayed this information to the team with him. Jessica could hear the increasing strain in his voice, evidence of the physical toll the harsh conditions were taking. We've adjusted course, he reported. Visibility at ground level is 0. Your guidance is our only reference point. Jessica focused entirely on tracking the moving figure, providing continuous updates on direction and approximate speed. Despite the subject's head start, the rescue team was moving faster and gradually closing the distance. "They're approximately 50 meters ahead of you now," Jessica informed them, moving into an area with large rock formations. "I see the rocks," Carter confirmed. "Any movement from the subject?" "They've stopped, appear to be taking shelter behind one of the larger formations." "Copy that?" Through her scope, Jessica watched as the rescue team approached the position where the figure had stopped. There appeared to be some kind of interaction, though. From her distance, she couldn't discern details. Several tense minutes passed before Carter's voice returned. "We've made contact. Second survivor is Dr. Elena Reyes, the team biologist. She's mobile but moderately hypothermic. The rest of their team established the snow shelter after becoming separated from Mark and Elena during the initial storm." "How many at the shelter?" "Two more, according to Elena, both alive but in worse condition. We're proceeding there now." Jessica maintained her observation position as the rescue expanded, providing periodic updates to base camp. Despite the success of the operation so far, Collins remained concerned about the deteriorating weather. "We need to extract all personnel before this front fully hits," he emphasized. "Including you, Jessica. The observation phase is complete. Begin your descent along the eastern route we discussed. A team will meet you halfway." "Not until everyone is accounted for," Jessica replied firmly. "That's an order, not a request," Collins insisted. "Carter and the ground team have the situation under control. Your brother is already being evacuated to medical facilities. There's no reason for you to remain in a dangerous position." Jessica was about to argue further when Carter's voice joined the conversation. "Jessica, he's right. Begin your descent now. I'll meet you at the extraction point once the remaining survivors are secure." Something in his tone made her hesitate. "You're not telling me everything." There was a pause before Carter responded. "The situation is more complex than anticipated. The trail to the shelter has been partially buried by a small avalanche. We're having to establish a new approach." Jessica studied the thermal images, noticing that the rescue team did indeed appear to be moving in a circuitous route rather than directly toward the shelter. "I can guide you through it," she offered. "I have the best vantage point." "Negative," Carter replied firmly. "You've done your part. Now follow orders and begin your descent." Reluctantly, Jessica began packing her equipment. As she prepared to leave, she took one final scan of the area with her thermal optics. What she saw made her freeze. "Carter, stop. There's unstable snowpack directly above your current position. I can see the temperature differential along the slope. Classic avalanche conditions." There was a moment of silence before Carter responded. "Can you guide us around it?" "Turn northeast immediately. There's a stable rock formation about 75 meters from your position that should provide safe passage." Through her scope, Jessica watched as the heat signatures changed direction, moving toward the formation she'd identified. They had covered about half the distance when she noticed movement along the slope above them. "Carter, move faster. The slope is shifting." For several heart-stopping moments, Jessica watched as the rescue team sprinted toward safety. The snow above them began sliding in slow motion, then accelerated into a full avalanche. The last heat signature, Carter, she was certain, barely reached the protected area before the mass of snow thundered past. "Overwatch 1 report," Jessica called frantically. "Carter, are you there?" Static filled the channel before his voice finally responded, breathless but intact. "We're secure. Good call, Jessica. That's twice today your observation has saved lives." Relief flooded through her, followed by fierce pride. Carter's training had prepared her for this moment, enabling her to see what others missed and act decisively under pressure. "Now, will you please begin your descent?" Carter added, a rare note of warmth entering his voice. "Copy that, Overwatch 1, Jessica replied, smiling despite the cold and fatigue. "Beginning descent now." 6 hours later, Jessica sat beside her brother's hospital bed. Mark was sleeping peacefully, his condition upgraded from critical to stable. The doctors had assured her that despite severe hypothermia and minor frostbite, he would make a full recovery. The door opened quietly and Carter entered. He had changed into dry clothes, but exhaustion lined his face. A medical bandage wrapped his left hand, evidence of an injury he hadn't mentioned during the operation. "How is he?" Carter asked, keeping his voice low. "Better," Jessica replied. "They're saying he'll be fine." She studied Carter with newfound understanding. "You're hurt." Carter glanced at his bandaged hand dismissively. superficial, happened during the final evacuation. You saved his life. We saved his life, Carter corrected. Your observation skills made the difference. You spotted both your brother and the unstable snowpack that could have buried the rescue team. Jessica nodded, accepting the acknowledgement of her contribution. They found the other two members of the research team, both alive thanks to the shelter they built. Carter took a seat in the corner of the room, his posture alert despite his obvious fatigue. Even here in the safety of a hospital, when he positioned himself with clear sight lines to the door and windows. Old habits, Jessica realized, ingrained through years of operating in hostile environments. There's something I need to ask you, she said after a moment of silence. You told me you were already on your way when Thomas contacted you. You said you had systems in place to alert you if my name appeared in emergency communications. She met his gaze directly. Why would you do that? Carter was quiet for a long time, weighing his response. Finally, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, handing it to Jessica. The image showed a group of soldiers in desert camouflage standing in front of a helicopter. Jessica immediately recognized a much younger Carter among them. But it was another face that caught her attention, a face she knew intimately from family photos. That's my father, she whispered, shocked. You knew my father? Carter nodded. Captain David Miller. We served together on multiple operations. He was my spotter during the Cievo mission I told you about. Jessica stared at the photograph, trying to process this revelation. Why didn't you tell me? Your father and I were part of a unit that officially didn't exist, Carter explained. Our operations remain classified even decades later. When I first saw you at the range, I recognized the resemblance immediately. So all this time, the training, the lessons, it was because of my father. Carter considered his words carefully. Your father saved my life more than once. When he died, I wasn't there to return the favor. Pain flickered across his face, quickly controlled, but undeniably present. When I saw you at the range struggling with techniques he had mastered, it felt like an opportunity to honor his memory by passing on what we had learned together. Jessica felt tears forming. He never talked about his work. Mom said it was classified, but I always sensed there was more he wasn't telling us. David was one of the finest soldiers I ever knew, Carter said quietly. But more importantly, he was a man of principle. He understood that our skills came with responsibility. Every shot we took was to protect others, never for glory or political advantage. That sounds like him, Jessica smiled through her tears, always talking about responsibility. Carter nodded. He spoke of you often, proudly. When I recognized you at the range, I knew immediately that you had his natural abilities, his eye for detail, his patience, his determination. Why the elaborate training program? Why not just tell me who you were from the beginning? Carter's expression grew solemn. Men like me don't suddenly appear in people's lives with stories about classified operations and expect to be welcomed. I needed to earn your trust first, and I needed to be certain you had the temperament for the knowledge I was sharing. Jessica understood then what had been happening over the past 18 months. Carter hadn't just been teaching her marksmanship. He'd been evaluating her character, determining whether she deserved to inherit the legacy of skills her father had helped develop. The mission where he died, Jessica said hesitantly. Can you tell me about it? Carter's face revealed the conflict within him, the desire to provide closure against a lifetime of operational security. Not everything, he said finally, but enough for you to understand that he died doing exactly what he believed in, protecting innocent lives. For the next hour, Carter shared carefully selected details about operations he and David Miller had conducted together. Each story revealed a man devoted to using his extraordinary skills to shield others from harm, often at great personal risk. Through Carter's measured words, Jessica began to see a side of her father she had never known, the warrior who had used his precision and patience not for destruction, but for protection. The last thing he said to me, Carter concluded quietly, was to look after his family if anything happened to him. I've kept track of you and your brother over the years from a distance. When Mark disappeared in these mountains, I knew it was time to become more directly involved. Jessica wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the connection between her father Carter and the skills that had just helped save her brother's life. All this time you've been teaching me my father's techniques. Carter nodded. Some of them. Others were ones we developed together. He was particularly skilled at reading environmental conditions, a talent you clearly inherited. Your observation of the avalanche risk today was exactly the kind of detail he would have spotted. Mark stirred in his hospital bed, drawing their attention. His eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Jessica, then moving to Carter with confusion. "Who's your friend?" he asked groggily. Jessica smiled, taking her brother's hand. "Mark, this is Bill Carter. He helped find you on the mountain." Mark studied Carter with increasing awareness. "You were there in that storm. That was suicide mission territory." Carter shrugged slightly. "I've operated in worse." "He's being modest," Jessica interjected. "He tracked you through a whiteout using thermal imaging, then personally carried you to the medical team." Mark's expression shifted to one of deep gratitude. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "No thanks necessary," Carter replied. "Your sister did the hard part, spotting your location from nearly a mile away through a snowstorm." "Always the overachiever," Mark said with a weak smile toward Jessica. "But seriously, how did you even know what to do out there?" "Last I checked, data analysts don't typically moonlight as mountain rescue specialists." Jessica and Carter exchanged a look. "It's a long story," she said. "One that actually starts with Dad." Mark's eyebrows rose with surprise. "Dad? What does he have to do with this?" Jessica glanced at Carter, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "It turns out Dad's military career was more interesting than we knew, and Mr. Carter here was his partner." Mark's eyes widened as he looked between them. "No way. Dad was some kind of special ops." "As I said," Jessica smiled, "it's a long story, one I'm just beginning to learn myself." A nurse entered to check Mark's vital signs, announcing that visiting hours would be ending soon. Carter rose from his chair, preparing to leave. "Will I see you next Tuesday?" Jessica asked as they stepped into the hallway. Carter studied her thoughtfully. "That depends. Our original training program is essentially complete. You've demonstrated mastery of the fundamental skills." "But there's more to learn," Jessica pressed. "You've only scratched the surface of what you and my father knew." "The question isn't whether there's more to learn," Carter replied carefully. "It's whether you understand the responsibility that comes with such knowledge. Your father never used his skills for personal advancement or glory. He saw them as tools for protection, nothing more." Jessica considered his words. "Today, those skills help save 6 lives. That seems like exactly the kind of responsibility my father would have wanted me to embrace." Carter nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Tuesday, then, we'll begin advanced applications." He turned to leave but paused. "Your father would have been proud today, not just of what you did, but how you did it." As Jessica watched him walk away, she felt a connection to her father stronger than any she had experienced since his death. Through Carter's teaching, a part of David Miller lived on his skills, his principles, his commitment to using precision as a means of protection rather than destruction. She returned to Mark's room, sitting beside his bed as he drifted back to sleep. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, but the deadly storm had passed. In its wake, Jessica found herself contemplating the path ahead. Carter had opened a door to a world her father had inhabited, a world where extraordinary skills carried equally extraordinary responsibilities. The skills that had saved Mark's life today could serve many purposes. Jessica was now certain which path she would choose. Like her father before her, she would use what she had learned to protect, not harm, to create safety rather than fear. The precision her father and Carter had mastered wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about making the right choices under pressure, about seeing clearly when others were blinded by chaos, about remaining steady when everything around you was in flux. These were the true lessons of precision that transcended marksmanship. And these were the lessons Jessica would continue to learn, now understanding the legacy she was inheriting. The nurse returned, informing Jessica that she should get some rest herself. As she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed with a text message from Carter. "Your room is booked at the hotel across the street. Get some sleep. Training continues when we return to Boston. Your father's story isn't finished yet." Jessica smiled, pocketing her phone. No, the story wasn't finished. In many ways, it was just beginning. 3 weeks after the rescue operation in Colorado, Jessica stood at the firing line of Liberty Range, adjusting her stance as Carter observed. The familiar environment felt different now, transformed by the knowledge she had gained about her father and the man who had been his partner. Mark had recovered fully and returned to Boston with her curious about the connection between his sister and the mysterious former soldier who had saved his life. Jessica had shared what she could, though much of Carter's past remained classified even to her. "Your breathing is off," Carter noted, his voice carrying the same measured patience she had come to respect. "Remember what I taught you about maintaining rhythm under pressure?" Jessica nodded, adjusting her technique. Since returning from Colorado, their training sessions had evolved. No longer focused solely on marksmanship fundamentals, Carter now taught her advanced observation techniques, situational awareness, and tactical decision-making. Frank Harrison watched them from the office window, his suspicion of Carter only deepened by the events of the past month. Thomas, by contrast, had become increasingly respectful toward Carter, occasionally sharing quiet conversations when they thought Jessica wasn't noticing. "Again," Carter instructed as Jessica completed a series of shots. Her grouping was tight but slightly off-center. Wind drift calculation was wrong, she critiqued herself before he could comment. Carter nodded approvingly. "Self-assessment is the mark of a true professional. You identified the error without needing external validation." He checked his watch. "Let's move to the classroom. There's something I want to show you." The classroom was a small meeting room at the back of the range that Carter had reserved for their theoretical discussions. As Jessica entered, she noticed several folders arranged on the table alongside maps and photographs. "What's this?" she asked, recognizing her father's handwriting on one of the folders. "Your inheritance," Carter replied, closing the door behind them. "Your father kept detailed records of our operations and techniques. Not official reports, those remain classified, but his personal observations and insights. Before his final mission, he entrusted them to me with specific instructions." Carter placed his hand on the stack of folders. "He wanted me to pass these to you and Mark when you were ready. I've judged that time to be now." Jessica stared at the folders, overwhelmed by their significance. "All this time you've had his records?" Carter nodded. "I've been evaluating you, Jessica. Not just your technical skills, but your character. Your father was adamant that his knowledge only be shared with someone who understood the responsibility it carried." Jessica carefully opened the top folder. Inside were handwritten notes, diagrams, and photographs documenting operations across multiple continents. Her father's meticulous attention to detail was evident in every page. "These contain more than just tactical information," Carter explained. "Your father documented ethical decision frameworks, psychological impacts of operations methods for maintaining humanity while conducting inherently inhumane actions. He believed that the mental and moral components of our work were more important than the physical techniques." Jessica turned the pages with reverence, seeing her father's personality reflected in his precise handwriting and thoughtful observations. "Why now? What changed to make you decide I'm ready?" Carter studied her carefully. "Colorado. You demonstrated not just technical competence but sound judgment under extreme pressure. You prioritized lives over personal safety. You made decisions based on protecting others rather than advancing personal interests." He paused. "In short, you acted as your father would have." A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas entered, his expression grave. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here asking for you, Bill. Says it's urgent." Carter tensed slightly, a reaction so subtle that only someone trained to observe would notice. "Who?" "Wouldn't give a name, just showed me this." Thomas handed over a small metal token. Carter examined it, his face betraying no emotion, though Jessica detected the slight increase in his alertness. "Where is he?" "Waiting in my office." "Jessica, stay here." Carter instructed, his tone shifting to one she had never heard before, the voice of command rather than instruction. "What's going on?" she asked. "Probably nothing," Carter replied, though his body language suggested otherwise. "Review the materials. I'll return shortly." After Carter left, Jessica began examining the folders more thoroughly. Each contained operational details from different regions where her father had served: Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Colombia. The missions varied but shared a common purpose: protection of civilian populations from specialized threats. In the Bosnia folder, she found photos of Sarajevo, the city Carter had mentioned during their early training. Images showed the devastation caused by the siege-bombed buildings, cratered streets, makeshift graves. Among them was a photo of a narrow urban canyon labeled the Sniper Alley in her father's handwriting, with precise measurements and calculations noted in the margins. Another document detailed counter-sniper operations, including the mission Carter had described, where he made the 800-meter shot. According to her father's notes, that single operation had saved an estimated 47 civilian lives by eliminating a sniper who had been targeting a route to the city's main water supply. Jessica was studying a tactical diagram when the door opened. Carter returned, accompanied by a man she had never seen before. Tall and lean, with close-cropped gray hair, the stranger carried himself with the same contained alertness she recognized in Carter. "Jessica, this is Michael Reeves," Carter introduced him, "a former colleague." Reeves nodded to her. "Captain Miller's daughter. The resemblance is remarkable." Carter gestured for Reeves to sit. "Michael has information relevant to our discussions. He worked with your father and me on several operations." Reeves studied Jessica with analytical precision. "Bill tells me you've been training under his guidance, that you've demonstrated exceptional aptitude." "I've had an exceptional teacher," Jessica replied, carefully sensing tension between the two men, despite their outwardly cordial behavior. "Indeed," Reeves turned to Carter. "Have you told her about Falcon?" Carter's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "We haven't reached that point in her training." "Events may not wait for your preferred timeline," Reeves replied evenly. "The situation has evolved." Jessica looked between them. "What's Falcon?" Carter exchanged a long look with Reeves before responding. "Falcon was the code name for your father's final mission, the operation where he was killed." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Jessica had spent years wondering about the circumstances of her father's death. The official notification had been vague, killed in action during a classified operation. No details provided, no body returned. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Carter drew a deep breath. "David was operating as my spotter in a mountainous region of eastern Afghanistan. Our mission was to locate and eliminate a key figure who had been orchestrating attacks against civilian infrastructure." "The target was Viktor Petrov," Reeves interjected. "Former Russian military turned freelance operator, specialized in strategic destabilization." Carter nodded. "We tracked Petrov for 11 days through extremely difficult terrain. When we finally identified a viable position, we were operating at the edge of our supply limits. The shot was nearly 200 meters across a valley with unpredictable wind conditions." Jessica listened intently, picturing the scene through the lens of everything Carter had taught her about long-distance precision operations. "I made the shot," Carter continued, his voice now devoid of emotion. "Confirmed elimination of the target. But during our extraction, we encountered an unexpected security element. David provided covering fire while I completed the necessary documentation and equipment preparation. He was hit by a sniper we hadn't identified in our initial surveillance." Carter paused, the memory clearly painful despite the years that had passed. "I was unable to recover his body. The mission parameters required immediate extraction once the primary objective was achieved. I had to leave him behind." The reality of her father's death hit Jessica with fresh impact. She had always imagined him dying instantly in some firefight or explosion. The thought of him being left behind, perhaps still alive, was almost unbearable. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, struggling to maintain composure. Reeves glanced at Carter before answering. "Because Viktor Petrov is alive." Jessica looked between them, confusion replacing grief. "But you said the shot was confirmed." "It was," Carter stated firmly. "I watched through the scope as the round impacted. All confirmation protocols were followed." "Nevertheless," Reeves continued, "intelligence confirms Petrov survived. He's been operating under various identities for the past decade, orchestrating operations in Syria, Ukraine, and most recently, domestic targets within the United States." Carter's expression hardened. "What evidence do you have?" Reeves removed a phone from his pocket, activating a secure application that displayed a series of surveillance photographs. These were taken 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. The images showed a man in his 60s with a distinctive scar along his jawline moving through a crowded street with practiced awareness of his surroundings. Facial recognition confirmed an 87% match to Petrov's last known appearance, Reeves explained. Gait analysis provides an additional confirmation at 92% probability. Carter studied the images with intense focus. "The scar pattern is consistent," he acknowledged reluctantly, "but without direct confirmation." "We have it," Reeves interrupted, swiping to another image. This one showed the same man meeting with a known associate from Petrov's network. This individual was positively identified as Alexei Kuznetsov, Petrov's former lieutenant. They were observed exchanging information related to infrastructure vulnerabilities. Jessica watched Carter's reaction carefully. For the first time since she had known him, he appeared genuinely unsettled. "If Petrov survived," she said slowly, "then everything about my father's death changes. The mission failed. The sacrifice was for nothing." "Not for nothing," Carter countered firmly. "The operation disrupted Petrov's network for years. Countless lives were saved as a result." "But he's back now," Jessica pressed, "and apparently targeting American infrastructure." Reeves nodded. "Current intelligence suggests he's planning an operation within the continental United States, possibly within the next 30 days. "What does this have to do with me?" Jessica asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Carter and Reeves exchanged another look before Carter spoke. "Michael represents an organization that continues the work your father and I were part of. They've been tracking Petrov's movements since indicators of his survival first emerged 3 years ago. And now they want your help to find him," Jessica concluded. "Not just mine," Carter replied, "ours." The implication hung in the air between them. Jessica felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger that her father's killer had survived, fear at the prospect of involvement in a real operation, and beneath it all, a strange sense of purpose. "Why would you need me? I'm not an operator." "You possess a unique combination of skills," Reeves explained. "Your analytical background combined with Carter's training gives you capabilities few others possess. More importantly, you're unknown to Petrov's network. No facial recognition, no operational history. You're asking me to participate in a mission to find the man who killed my father," Jessica stated plainly. "A man who apparently survived a shot that Carter was certain had eliminated him." "We're asking you to consider it," Carter corrected. "This would be entirely voluntary, and primarily in an analytical capacity." Jessica stood, needing physical movement to process what she was hearing. "I need some time to think about this." Carter nodded. "Of course, but time may be limited if the intelligence about Petrov's timeline is accurate." "I'll drive you home," Thomas offered from the doorway where he had been quietly observing. "Give you some space to process this." Jessica nodded gratefully, gathering her belongings. As she prepared to leave, she turned back to Carter. "Did you know when you started training me, did you know Petrov might be alive?" Carter met her gaze directly. "No, I believed he was eliminated. I would never have used you as bait or preparation for an operation without your informed consent." Something in his steadfast response reassured her. Whatever else was happening, Carter's mentorship had been genuine. "Tomorrow," she said finally. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." Jessica spent a restless night reviewing everything she had learned. Mark noticed her distraction during dinner, but didn't press when she explained she was processing new information about their father. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you," he said simply. "But remember that Dad wouldn't want you putting yourself at risk out of some misplaced sense of obligation." His words stayed with her as she pored over her father's documents into the early morning hours. The detailed accounts of operations, the ethical frameworks he had developed, the constant emphasis on protection rather than retribution, all of it painted a picture of a man who had used his extraordinary skills with profound moral purpose. By dawn, Jessica had made her decision. She arrived at the range early, finding Carter already present, cleaning his rifle with characteristic precision. He looked up as she entered, reading her expression. "You've decided," he stated rather than asked. Jessica nodded. "I'll help, but I need complete transparency from now on. No more filtered information or partial truths." Carter set aside his cleaning equipment. "Agreed, though some operational details will need to remain compartmentalized for security." "I understand operational security," Jessica replied. "What I won't accept is being manipulated or used as a pawn." "Fair enough." Carter gestured to a seat across from him. "Michael will be here shortly to discuss next steps. Before he arrives, there's something you should know." Jessica sat, noting the unusual gravity in Carter's demeanor. "The shot that was supposed to eliminate Petrov," he began, "was the most challenging of my career. Extreme distance, complex environmental factors, limited window of opportunity. I've replayed it in my mind countless times since learning he might have survived. You think you missed? Jessica asked. Carter shook his head. I know I hit him. I saw the impact through the scope. But in analyzing all possibilities, I've considered that the round may have struck at an angle that resulted in a severe wound rather than immediate fatality. And because you had to extract quickly after Dad was shot, there was no opportunity to confirm, Jessica concluded. Correct. The mission parameters required immediate evacuation once the primary objective was compromised. I had to make an impossible choice attempt to recover your father's body against overwhelming tactical disadvantage or extract with the intelligence we had gathered. The pain in Carter's eyes told Jessica how deeply that decision had affected him. Dad would have wanted you to complete the mission, she said softly. That's what I've told myself for 12 years, Carter replied. But the possibility that Petrov survived means the mission wasn't truly completed, which means your father's sacrifice hasn't yet been fully honored. The door opened and Reeves entered, accompanied by Thomas. The range manager had apparently been more involved in this world than Jessica had realized. Thomas has been our support contact for several years, Carter explained, noting her surprise. His Air Force career provided excellent cover for maintaining certain communication channels. Thomas nodded to Jessica. Your father saved my life in Bosnia before I even knew who he was. When Bill contacted me about establishing a training environment for you, I was glad to help. The pieces continued falling into place. The coincidental job at a range with connections to her father's former network. Carter's appearance and mentorship. All of it had been more orchestrated than she had imagined, yet still guided by genuine purpose rather than manipulation. Reeves spread several folders across the table. If you are committed to assisting, we need to begin preparation immediately. Intelligence suggests Petrov is in the final planning stages for an operation targeting critical infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure? Jessica asked. Water treatment facilities, Reeves replied. Specifically computer systems controlling chemical management for major urban centers. His technical team has developed a method for remotely overriding safety protocols, potentially allowing for introduction of harmful substances into municipal water supplies. The casualty potential would be catastrophic, Carter added grimly. Hundreds of thousands affected across multiple cities. Jessica studied the intelligence briefings, drawing on her data analysis background to identify patterns. These access attempts show a systematic approach. They're mapping the network architecture, probing for vulnerabilities. Exactly, Reeves confirmed. Petrov's team includes some of the most sophisticated cyber operators in the field, but they still need physical access to certain secure systems. Which means Petrov himself will likely be present for the final phase, Carter added. Based on his operational history, he always personally oversees critical stages. Jessica continued analyzing the data. These intrusion patterns suggest they're focusing on 3 primary targets. She indicated locations on the map: Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco. But the Boston attempts show a more advanced progression. I think that's their primary target, with the others serving as diversions. Carter and Reeves exchanged impressed glances. That aligns with our assessment, Reeves acknowledged. We believe Petrov will be in Boston within the week to oversee final preparations. So what's the plan? Jessica asked. Identify and locate Petrov, Carter explained. Confirm his identity beyond any doubt. Document his activities and network connections. Then specialized teams will make the actual interdiction. In my role, analysis and observation, Carter said firmly. Your data skills combined with the observational techniques I've taught you make you ideally suited for the identification phase. You'll work with me to establish surveillance positions and process incoming intelligence. I won't be directly involved in any action, Jessica clarified. Absolutely not, Carter assured her. Your father would never forgive me if I put you in that position. This is strictly observation and analysis. Over the next several hours, they developed a comprehensive plan. Jessica's background in data analysis proved invaluable as she identified patterns in Petrov's movements and communications that had eluded traditional intelligence methods. Her fresh perspective, combined with Carter's tactical experience, created a surprisingly effective partnership. We'll establish primary observation at these 3 locations, Carter indicated on the map. Based on Jessica's analysis, these represent the most likely areas for Petrov to appear within the next 72 hours. Reeves nodded approvingly. I'll coordinate with the tactical teams. They'll remain on standby until positive identification is confirmed. As they finalized the details, Jessica felt a strange sense of fulfillment. This was what her father had done using precision skills and analytical thinking to prevent harm rather than cause it. For the first time, she understood his choice of career at a visceral level. "We begin tomorrow," Carter announced, gathering the materials. "Get some rest tonight. Once the operation starts, opportunities for downtime will be limited." As the others left to make preparations, Carter remained behind with Jessica. "Are you certain about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we begin, there's no backing out." Jessica considered the question carefully. "I'm certain that I want to help prevent whatever Petrov is planning. I'm certain that I want to honor my father's sacrifice by completing what he started." She paused. "What I'm not certain about is whether I'm doing this for justice or revenge." Carter nodded, understanding the distinction. Your father wrestled with that same question. He eventually concluded that motive matters less than outcome. If your actions prevent harm to innocent people, the internal justification becomes secondary. "That sounds like him." Jessica smiled sadly. "Practical even about ethical dilemmas. He would be proud of you." Carter said, his usual reserve softening momentarily. "Not just for your skills, but for your willingness to question your own motives. That self-awareness is what separates professionals from zealots." As Jessica prepared to leave, a thought occurred to her. "Carter, there's something I've been wondering. All those months of training, the specific skills you taught me, was this always the end goal? Were you preparing me for this exact scenario?" Carter considered his answer carefully. "I trained you because I saw your potential and because I made a promise to your father. The skills I taught you have universal applications beyond any specific mission." He paused. "But yes, I always knew there might come a time when those skills would be needed for something more significant than target practice. I just didn't know what form that would take." Jessica nodded, appreciating his honesty. "Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow," Carter agreed. "The real training begins." Yeah. The Boston financial district bustled with morning commuters, none aware of the surveillance operation unfolding around them. From her position in a coffee shop with clear sight lines to the target building, Jessica monitored foot traffic while maintaining communication with Carter, who was positioned on a rooftop 2 blocks away. "Subject approaching from the south entrance," Carter's voice reported through her earpiece. "Gray suit, blue tie, carrying black briefcase. Matches physical parameters." Jessica casually shifted her position, focusing on the approaching figure, while pretending to work on her laptop. The man matched the general description of Petrov, but from her angle she couldn't confirm facial features. "I need him to turn approximately 30 degrees east for facial confirmation," she reported quietly, her lips barely moving. As if on cue, the subject paused to check his phone, turning slightly toward Jessica's position. She captured several discrete photographs using a specialized app on her phone, immediately transmitting them to their secure server for analysis. Images captured. Running comparison now. For 3 days, they had maintained surveillance on key locations identified through Jessica's analysis of Petrov's historical patterns and current intelligence. This was their fourth potential sighting, the previous 3 having been ruled out after careful verification. "Facial recognition results inconclusive," Reeves reported through the communication channel. 67% matched to known Petrov parameters, below confirmation threshold. Jessica studied the subject more carefully, applying the observational techniques Carter had taught her. Something about the man's movement pattern caught her attention. "Running additional analysis on gait and posture," she reported. "There's an asymmetry in his stride consistent with historical injury to the left hip or lower back. Petrov sustained a fragmentation wound to his lower left side during an operation in Chechnya," Carter confirmed. "Good catch, Jessica." The enhanced analysis returned moments later. "Gait analysis shows 89% match to Petrov's movement profile," Reeves reported. "Combined with facial parameters, we're at 78% confidence, still below intervention threshold." Jessica continued her observation as the subject entered the target building, a technology firm known to provide services to several water management facilities. "We need to maintain surveillance," she advised. "If this is Petrov, he'll likely meet with his technical team within the building." "Agreed," Carter responded. "I'm repositioning to the secondary observation point with line of sight to the east exits." Jessica, maintain your position. For the next 4 hours, Jessica remained in place, periodically changing her seating position to avoid drawing attention while maintaining visual coverage of the building's main entrance. The subject had not reemerged. Activity at the service entrance, Carter suddenly reported. 3 individuals exiting, including our subject. Jessica accessed the surveillance camera feeds Reeves had established. Confirming visual. Subject is accompanied by 2 males, both carrying equipment cases consistent with specialized electronic testing gear. The taller companion is a known associate of Petrov, Reeves added. Alexei Kuznetsov, former Russian military intelligence, specializing in electronic warfare. Confidence level now at 92% for positive identification. They're heading toward the parking garage, Carter observed. Likely departing the area. We need mobile surveillance. Stand by, Reeves replied. Mobile team moving into position. Jessica watched as the 3 men entered a black SUV and departed the parking garage. The surveillance operation shifted to the mobile team, while she and Carter prepared to relocate to the next anticipated location based on her predictive analysis. As she gathered her equipment, Jessica felt a curious mixture of emotions. The analytical part of her mind was fully engaged in the operation, processing information and making connections with professional detachment. But beneath that, a more personal awareness burned steadily. That man, the one she had just helped identify, was responsible for her father's death. The same hands that carried that innocent-looking briefcase had likely fired the shot that killed David Miller. Carter met her at the predetermined rendezvous point, immediately sensing her internal conflict. You're doing well, he said simply, maintaining professional distance while executing the mission parameters perfectly. Is it always this complicated, she asked as they drove toward their next observation position? Balancing the personal and professional aspects. Always, Carter confirmed. Your father used to say that the true test of professionalism isn't the absence of emotion, but the ability to function effectively despite it. Sounds like him. Jessica smiled briefly. Always practical. Their next observation position overlooked a waterfront property identified in Jessica's analysis as a potential operational staging area. Based on the electronic equipment Petrov's team had collected, they would need a secure location with specific power and connectivity capabilities to prepare their cyber attack. Target vehicle approaching, Carter reported as the black SUV appeared on the access road, confirming 3 occupants. Jessica focused her specialized optics on the vehicle as it parked outside a nondescript warehouse. Visual confirmation on subject and companions. They're unloading equipment from the trunk. This matches the profile for final technical preparations, Reeves commented through their secure channel. Based on Jessica's timeline analysis, they're likely configuring their systems for the actual intrusion attempt. How long until they're operational? Carter asked. Jessica consulted her analytical model. Based on the equipment observed and standard configuration requirements, minimum 12 hours, maximum 36 before they're ready to execute. Tactical team is on standby, Reeves confirmed. Once we have absolute confirmation of identity and hostile intent, they'll move in. For the next 6 hours, Jessica and Carter maintained their observation position, documenting the comings and goings at the warehouse. Additional subjects arrived, bringing more equipment and supplies. Jessica cataloged each arrival building, a comprehensive picture of Petrov's operational team. As darkness fell, they switched to night observation equipment. The warehouse remained active, lights visible through the few windows not covered by security measures. Movement at the main entrance, Carter alerted, focusing his specialized optics. Subject is exiting the building alone. Jessica adjusted her position to maintain visual contact. Confirmed, he's moving toward the waterfront. The figure walks slowly along the private dock attached to the warehouse property, eventually stopping at the end to stare out over the harbor. Even from their distance, Jessica could see him light a cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. Requesting enhanced imaging, she said quietly. Carter adjusted his equipment, zooming in on the solitary figure. The enhanced image appeared on Jessica's tablet, showing Petrov's face clearly illuminated by the cigarette's glow as he inhaled. Facial recognition analysis running, Reeves reported. 99.7% match confirmed. Target positively identified as Viktor Petrov. A moment of absolute clarity washed over Jessica. There he was, the man who had killed her father, standing alone, seemingly contemplative as he looked out over the water. In that moment, he appeared surprisingly human, not the monster she had imagined. Tactical team is green lit, Reeves announced. Beginning approach now. Maintain observation and report any changes in target position or status. Jessica watched as Petrov finished his cigarette, extinguishing it carefully before turning back toward the warehouse. Something about his deliberate movements caught her attention. Wait, she said suddenly. Something's wrong. His behavior pattern has changed. Carter immediately focused more intently. Explain. He's scanning the perimeter systematically, Jessica observed. His posture has shifted from relaxed to alert. I think he's spotted something. Carter zoomed in further. Confirmed, he's identified the tactical approach. He's moving quickly back toward the building. Tactical team be advised, Reeves warned. Target is aware of your approach. Exercise extreme caution. Events unfolded with alarming speed. Petrov reached the warehouse door shouting something to those inside. Lights immediately went out as the occupants initiated what appeared to be emergency protocols. They're destroying evidence, Carter assessed. Standard counterintelligence procedure when compromise is detected. The tactical team accelerated their approach, but Jessica could see they wouldn't reach the building before Petrov's team completed their evacuation. There's a secondary exit on the north side, she reported, consulting the building schematics. Based on their movements, they'll be extracting through that route within the next 60 seconds. Tactical team redirect elements to the north exit, Reeves ordered. Jessica continued monitoring the situation through her optics, tracking heat signatures, moving rapidly through the building toward the northern exit. Suddenly, she noticed a familiar pattern. Carter, look at this, she directed, highlighting a specific heat signature on the shared thermal feed. The movement pattern matches Petrov exactly. Same gate asymmetry we identified earlier. Carter studied the feed intently. Confirmed. That's our primary target moving toward the northeast corner. He's separated from the main group. Tactical team be advised, Reeves relayed. Primary target is isolated northeastern quadrant of the structure moving toward exterior wall. Possible unconventional exit strategy in progress. Jessica watched as Petrov's heat signature approached what appeared to be a solid wall. He's accessing a concealed exit point not shown on the building plans, she realized. He's going to evade the tactical team entirely. Carter made an immediate decision. I'm repositioning to intercept. Jessica, maintain observation and guide me to his exit point. Carter, wait, Jessica protested. The operational plan specified observation only. Plans evolve based on field conditions, Carter replied, already moving. This may be our only opportunity to apprehend Petrov before he disappears again. Jessica watched anxiously as Carter's signature moved rapidly toward the building's perimeter. Meanwhile, Petrov had breached the concealed exit and was now moving along what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel running parallel to the waterfront. Target is proceeding south through a subterranean passage, she reported, emerging approximately 50 meters from your position in 30 seconds. Copy that, Carter acknowledged, moving to intercept. Jessica held her breath as the distance between Carter and Petrov decreased. The tactical team was fully engaged with the remaining members of Petrov's organization, leaving Carter to confront the primary target alone. Carter, be advised, Reeves warned. Intelligence indicates Petrov is likely armed and known to carry specialized weaponry. Understood, came Carter's terse reply. Jessica watched through her optics as Petrov emerged from the tunnel exit, scanning his surroundings with professional caution before proceeding toward what appeared to be a prepositioned escape vehicle. Carter stepped from the shadows directly into his path. Even from her distant position, Jessica could see the moment of recognition as the two men faced each other. Enemies who had believed each other dead now unexpectedly reunited after 12 years. Petrov reacted with trained reflexes, reaching for a concealed weapon. But Carter had anticipated the movement, already closing the distance between them with surprising speed for a man his age. The confrontation happened so quickly that Jessica could barely follow it. Carter deflected Petrov's weapon, driving him back against a concrete barrier. Petrov countered with practiced efficiency, breaking Carter's grip and creating separation between them. For several seconds, they circled each other, two apex predators, recognizing a worthy opponent. Jessica could see them exchanging words, though she couldn't hear what was said. Suddenly, Petrov made another move, drawing a secondary weapon from an ankle holster. Carter reacted instantly, closing distance again, before Petrov could bring the weapon to bear. They grappled briefly before both men went down, disappearing from Jessica's line of sight behind a row of storage containers. "Carter," Jessica called it into her comm. "Status report." Silence greeted her call. The tactical team was still occupied with the main warehouse, unable to provide immediate support. "I've lost visual on both Carter and the target," she reported to Reeves. "Last position behind the container array at the south dock." "Stay in position," Reeves ordered. "Tactical team is redirecting elements to that location now." Jessica tried to comply, but concern for Carter overwhelmed her professional detachment. Without conscious decision, she found herself moving toward the exit, determined to reach the confrontation site. "Jessica, maintain your position," Reeves repeated sharply. "That's a direct order." "He's alone down there," Jessica replied, already descending the stairs. "I'm proceeding to provide support." The distance from her observation post to the dock seemed endless. Jessica moved as quickly as she could while maintaining tactical awareness, using the techniques Carter had taught her for moving through potentially hostile territory. As she approached the container array, she slowed, listening intently for any sounds that might reveal the location of the two men. A faint noise drew her attention to the right, what sounded like labored breathing. Jessica moved cautiously toward the sound, drawing the sidearm Carter had insisted she carry despite her observer role. As she rounded the corner of a container, she found them. Carter was on his knees, one hand pressed against his side where blood seeped between his fingers. Petrov stood several feet away, weapon trained steadily on Carter's chest. Neither had noticed Jessica's arrival, focused entirely on each other. "12 years," Petrov was saying, his accented English clear in the night air. "I spent 3 years recovering from your shot. The doctors said I would never walk normally again." He gestured with his free hand toward his left side. "You nearly succeeded." "A mistake I won't repeat," Carter replied, his voice strained but steady. Petrov smiled coldly. "There won't be another opportunity, old friend. Unlike you, I don't leave enemies breathing." Jessica raised her weapon, applying the fundamentals Carter had drilled into her over countless hours of training. Breathe, aim, squeeze. Her finger began to apply pressure to the trigger. In that moment, Carter's eyes flicked toward her position, registering her presence. A nearly imperceptible shake of his head communicated his instruction, "Don't shoot." Jessica hesitated, uncertain. She had a clear shot, and Petrov remained unaware of her presence. Every instinct urged her to take the shot to eliminate the threat to Carter and avenge her father in one decisive action. But something in Carter's expression gave her pause. This wasn't about revenge. It had never been about revenge. Her father and Carter had dedicated their lives to protection, not retribution. Taking the shot from her position with her motivations mixed between duty and vengeance would dishonor everything they stood for. Instead, Jessica made a different choice. "Viktor Petrov," she called clearly, stepping partially into view while maintaining her cover. "Federal agents have the building surrounded. Your team is already in custody. Lower your weapon." Petrov's head snapped toward her, momentarily distracted. In that instant of divided attention, Carter moved with the last reserves of his strength, launching himself forward to tackle Petrov around the knees. Both men went down again, struggling for control of the weapon. Jessica maintained her aim, but couldn't risk a shot with the two men entangled. A single gunshot echoed across the water. For a terrible moment, Jessica couldn't tell who had been hit. Then Petrov's body went limp, and Carter pushed himself away, still clutching his bleeding side. Jessica rushed forward, securing Petrov's weapon before checking his condition. A single wound to the chest, self-inflicted during the struggle. His eyes stared sightlessly at the night sky. "Carter," Jessica turned her attention to her mentor, who had collapsed against a container. "Stay with me. Medical support is on the way." "Good distraction," Carter managed, his breathing labored. "Clean execution. Your father would approve." Jessica applied pressure to his wound, using her jacket as a makeshift bandage. "Save your strength. Tactical team is inbound." Carter's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "You made the right choice. You could have taken the shot, but you chose the higher path." Pride shone in his eyes despite the pain. "That's what separates us from them. Not our skills, but how we choose to use them." The tactical team arrived moments later, securing the area and providing emergency medical care for Carter. As they loaded him into a medical transport, Jessica remained by his side, refusing to leave despite Reeves' attempts to debrief her immediately. "The mission is complete," she told him firmly. "The debriefing can wait." 3 months later, Jessica stood at the firing line at Liberty Range, adjusting her stance as she prepared to fire. The familiar environment had resumed its normal operations, though everything had changed since the night of Petrov's death. Carter watched from nearby, still moving carefully as he recovered from his wounds. The official investigation had cleared both of them, recognizing their actions as necessary to prevent a potentially catastrophic attack on civilian infrastructure. Petrov's network had been dismantled. His technical team imprisoned, the threat neutralized. Your breathing is still inconsistent. Carter noted his mentorship unchanged despite all they had experienced together. Remember what I taught you about maintaining rhythm under pressure? Jessica nodded, adjusting her technique. Their training sessions had continued, though, with a different purpose now. No longer preparation for an unknown future challenge, but refinement of skills she had already proven under the most demanding circumstances. Better, Carter approved as she completed a series of shots with exceptional precision. You've integrated the lessons completely now. Technical skill combined with sound judgment. Jessica safed her weapon before turning to him. I've been thinking about what comes next. Carter raised an eyebrow. And the organization Reeves represents has offered me a position. Analytical support for field operations similar to the role I played during the Petrov mission. Carter nodded, unsurprised. They recognize talent when they see it. What did you tell them? That I needed to consult with my mentor first, Jessica replied. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about continuing my father's legacy. Our legacy now. Carter considered her words carefully. Your father believed that extraordinary skills carried extraordinary responsibilities. He chose to use his abilities to protect rather than harm, to preserve rather than destroy. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. Whatever path you choose, that principle should guide your decisions. It will, Jessica promised. But I'm not sure I can do this alone. You won't be alone, Carter assured her. Whether I'm physically present or not, everything I've taught you, everything your father stood for, remains with you. Jessica smiled. Actually, I was hoping for something more concrete than philosophical guidance. Reeves mentioned they're looking for a training consultant as well, someone with field experience to develop the next generation of operatives. Carter's expression shifted to one of surprise. Are you offering me a job, Jessica? More like suggesting a partnership, she clarified. Your experience combined with my analytical approach. Seems like a combination that's already proven effective. For a long moment, Carter was silent, considering the proposition. Jessica could see him weighing options, assessing implications, evaluating potential outcomes, the same methodical process he applied to every significant decision. Your father once told me that true mastery isn't achieved until you've passed your knowledge to others, he said finally. I've started that process with you. Perhaps it's time to expand the circle. Jessica felt a surge of satisfaction. So that's a yes. Carter's expression softened into what might almost be called a smile. It's a provisional acceptance pending further operational details. Jessica laughed. You really can't give a simple answer to anything, can you? Precision requires specificity, Carter replied, though his eyes held unexpected warmth. Another lesson your father taught me. As they prepared to leave the range, Jessica paused at the memorial wall where photographs of deceased members hung. A recent addition showed her father in his uniform, his expression serious but eyes kind. He would be proud, Carter said quietly, joining her. Not just of your skills, but of the judgment you have demonstrated in using them. Jessica nodded, feeling a connection to her father stronger than any she had experienced since his death. Through Carter's teaching and her own choices during the Petrov operation, a part of David Miller lived on his skills, his principles, his commitment to using precision as a force for protection rather than destruction. So what now? She asked as they walked toward the exit. Now, Carter replied, the real training begins. Everything before was just preparation. Jessica smiled, recognizing the familiar phrase from their earliest sessions. The circle had completed itself, yet also opened into a new beginning. The student was becoming a teacher, the apprentice, a partner. The legacy not just preserved, but extended. Outside, snow had begun to fall, reminding Jessica of Carter's description of that day in Sievo so long ago. But unlike that solitary mission in a war-torn land, they now faced the future together, guardians of a legacy built on precision, protection, and purpose. Same time next week. she asked, echoing his words from their first meeting. Carter nodded, a rare smile crossing his features. Same time next week.